Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to have a really, really fun time here. I know you guys can't wait to hear what we're going to talk about. Of course, it has to do with slavery, but I want to be as kind as I can when we get into this so that anyone who's watching this, whatever your faith is, can handle listening to what we're trying to say. And I want people to understand from our side, I once was on the Christian side, exactly the problem we find, but also the facts. We're just going to lay out the facts. So we'll get with you in just a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I always do that because it's live and it takes people a while to pop on. And I did this old intro with Dr. Joshua Bowen. I don't know what I'm about to click here, so bear with me. Okay. Can you hear me? Do you even hear anything? There was nothing there, huh? No audio? Hold on. Something's up with the audio here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you right now.
Okay. I don't know if you're muted. Did you hear any noise when I hit that?
No.
Okay, well, we'll just defeat Leviathan together real quick. We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm so excited. I don't usually do this. I really don't usually do this in my lives. In my lives, I usually interview scholars, talk to them, and very rarely do I ever play the videos from other people's channels, especially Christian apologists. I just never really gave two hoots. It just wasn't something that I ever even gave a crap about getting into. I don't know why. It wasn't really an interest. But I did enjoy our interview a long time ago on slavery with your book. So before we get into this, I want to go ahead and plug your YouTube. I hope you guys can see that. What's pulled up here? For some reason, it's only pulling up one page at a time. And I don't know why. Let's see if this works. No, it only allows one page at a time.
Well, look, the Sam Hill, Bobby.
I know, right? Well, look,
I'm a veteran of 2 foreign wars.
Go to his YouTube, subscribe to his channel. Obviously, all the work that you guys do over there, help support them. He's got books. It's down in the description. Do all that. Okay, we're going to get into this. So we just did a show right here. This is the show. It was unbelievable, wasn't it, Dr. Josh? Look,
I think you did that on purpose. Like
I waited till you took a sip. I didn't even notice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Really enjoyed it.
Powerful. Very powerful. And we're going to end up playing clips from all of these things. I want you guys to pay attention. I just tagged some of the major predominant, if you will, apologists out there. Frank Turek, Capturing Christianity. What do you meme? I couldn't find David Wood. I tried. I don't know where he's at. He's probably in an insane asylum. I'm just teasing. Inside joke. Anyway, look, thanks for the super chat. I don't even know how to pronounce your name. You always said D is silent. Thank you so much. And also Suicide Dropkick. Thanks for the continued awesome work. We're going to get into these Christian apologists. And I want you guys to obviously leave your comments. I don't care. Start a debate in the comment section. Leave super chats if you want us to answer questions, and we're going to delve into this. So, Dr. Josh, I want to start finding common ground first before we even get into our criticisms and our problems with what we find. I was raised a Christian to some degree, but I took Christianity really serious as a young teen. And being someone born and raised in that type of household, you dismiss any negative things that you come across because honestly, they never were negative. The story of Moses and the freedom of the slaves. And, when you hear them preach, for example, from the pulpit. And God told Joseph, and all this evil was done on purpose to bring them into Egypt. Then God makes them slaves for 430 years, or if you will, they were slaves for who knows how long. I'll just say 430 because that's how long the biblical number puts that they were in Egypt. And then what happens? God brought them into Egypt so that he could have them be freed by himself. You never, in the way I think of it now, we don't think that is bad. It's almost like a parent that drops their kid off in a potentially extremely dangerous place where bad things happen just to strengthen them and then one day free them to go, haha, guess who did that?
Are there people that do that?
I don't think so, but I'm
okay.
trying to
it's like, yeah, this is, it's just like this very common thing that people do.
Well, no, I know it's not. I'm just saying, like, we saw it with no problems.
Yeah.
We wore a certain glasses. And I think Christian apologists are still doing this because they see the problem on slavery. And not only slavery. I mean, there's sex slaves, there's indentured servants, and there's chattel slavery that we see. And what do you do with that? Well, oftentimes they run to Jesus and they can't have their Lord condoning or agreeing with these things. So now they got to go to the Old Testament and make sure that it isn't what you would think it is. So I wanted to start with the idea of slavery from the Christian perspective. And if you're cool, I want you to interrupt me when it's time and say, hey, I want to comment on that right there. I know. So I'm going to have you choose which apologist would you like to start with to play the clip from. Out of the ones I have, I'll tell you who I have. Jeff Durbin, who confronts a lady outside of his church. Braxton.
Let's start with that one. I've never watched anything by him.
All right, we'll start with him. And the reason why he was interesting is he doesn't have any direct video that I was looking online for that like address this topic. So to speak,
I picked the wrong one, is what you're saying?
Let's start with the worst at first. I think you picked the right one. Let's get him out of the way. You know what I mean? Protester at church. Let me know if you guys can hear this. I had to get it around the part where he comes out of the church. To give you background, this lady is, I don't know, I think she's a Christian too, maybe? It's hard to tell. She like gets down on her knees and prays unless she's mocking or something. But Jeff Durbin comes out and here's what happens. Oh, I've got this sped up too, by the way. Let me drop this down so everyone understand what's being said.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. God bless you. So you disagree with the value that God puts on a woman when he says that a rapist should get the death penalty for rape. You believe that it's not so bad. You don't believe that it's so bad.
Because the Bible also says that slavery is perfectly okay.
Well, actually, could you give me the verse that says that? Because did you know that the Bible actually says that if you kidnap and enslave somebody, it's a death penalty? Once again, you need to get to know the worldview you're critiquing before you try and critique it, because you look ignorant standing there saying the Bible condones slavery. So once again, let me ask you that.
I already kind of agree with the lady. But anyway, I'm going to stop there because it gets into, they rabbit trail into stuff that's irrelevant to the slavery topic. And it just goes on and on and on. But would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really common apologetic, right? To sort of divert to, Exodus 21:16 is the big one, right? It's, so it's illegal to kidnap somebody and to enslave them. And so that's sort of used as like, aha, you can't, there can't be any such thing as slavery because look, it's illegal to kidnap someone. To which, I mean, if you just think about it for a little bit, is it illegal to own a car today? Well, no. It's illegal to steal a car, right? It's illegal to steal somebody else's car and make it your own. So what the law is dealing with is kidnapping a free person, which, by the way, was illegal everywhere. You could see that in the ancient Near East, where nobody argues if there's slavery or not. It's also illegal to kidnap. It's illegal to steal things that are not yours, right? So it's sort of one of those things when people say it to me, I go, one of my old professors Glenn Schwartz used to do this thing where he would make a point in his archaeology class, and if it didn't make a lot of sense, there'd be this silence, and he'd say, "Yeah," and that's what I want to say. Like I want a little bit of silence, and then, yeah. So, yeah, it certainly doesn't nullify the endorsement of slavery in the Hebrew Bible and in the laws. So
we're going to hear a lot of that in all of these apologists. And I guess my goal, like I know that faith is a powerful thing, Josh, and it's one of those things that some people have for an emotional reason. They are just hopeful, right? They want to believe because that's either they were raised that way, they're comfortable with it. It's like rooting for a team that your parents rooted for. If you're raised in a certain area and you like that football team or whatever, it's like, it's much more, I'd say, deeply seated than that, of course, but it touches the same aspects. And it's like the tribal mind, if you will. But there's more to it. There's some type of emotional connection there. I'm not interested in making someone go through a traumatic experience because I know deconstruction is like mourning a death. It sometimes can be an experience, a painful experience, trying to leave your faith. Fine. I just want to get these apologists to face the reality of what happened and then try to figure out how that they can justify their worldview using the Bible. So it's you know what I mean?
I wrestle with this, and I feel like I in my spare time do what I do here on online. Primarily because I don't like how misinterpreting, people that misinterpret the biblical text, misuse the biblical text to further their own agendas, whether they realize they're their own agendas or not. I don't like that in general, right? So when I see people, for example, in the LGBTQ community being having their rights taken away because the biblical text advocates for the death of people in that community. I think that needs to be pointed out, and that needs to be stopped, right? So this is one of the reasons that I'm against this type of Christianity, is because of what it eventually leads to. So yeah.
And we're going to play a clip from the Christian scholar that joined us, really good friend, Jay. I love that guy, man. I mean, my point is not to take everyone's faith and throw it in the dumpster. No, but
my wife is a Christian. Everybody just has to remember that. My wife is an Anglican.
And I mean, that means she's not like a Bible thumper, like a hardcore literalist, or even a strict hardcore extremist when it comes to this stuff. And I was that. So I'm speaking about myself. I'm speaking about you. I'm definitely going to talk about you as much as I can. You know what I mean?
It's the best way to do it.
That's the best way. You know who we need to talk about? We need, or at least have talk. Let's have Braxton. Let's have him come on and make a comment here. It's a long broadcast. I put it at 1.5 speed because, well, let's be honest, it's a long broadcast. And so I don't want to spend too much time. I don't know how far he goes. I literally found a part where he started bringing up something, and I don't know if this gets into slavery, so let's see.
Things and this is always one of them, so it's an important thing to talk about. I do want to say at the beginning of the show that just like when we talk about arguments from evil that atheists might bring about suffering and pain in the world, the fact is this is certainly a question, an issue, a topic that should give Christians pause. It should not be something that we brush off as trivial or something like that. We should take it seriously, because if the atheists were right in what they're saying about this, it would look really bad. It wouldn't mean that Christianity was false, but it would look really bad and may change our understanding of the character of God. And so this is a serious issue. And we need to remember too that when you broach a topic like slavery, there are people in our culture who are currently slaves, who are in the sex trade or whatever. There are people who have great grandparents who were slaves, and so this is a big topic that we need to have a certain amount of respect when we enter it. Now, that doesn't mean that we treat with respect every ridiculous thing said by our opponents on this issue. So that's my preamble. And I want to add disclaimer.
Is there a way to turn up the audio?
That I tried, Jim. I see your comment, and it seems that it's maxed out. Are you guys able to hear it though? I mean, is it doable?
I can.
Okay, I hear it good too. I hope it's coming through on your end, not just through my microphone, but actually through the computer. I don't know where he's going to actually start talking about it, but I like what he said so far.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think it's incredibly important. I think a lot of apologists that I interact with want to sort of brush this off. So I appreciate that.
Okay, awesome. Let's see what we got here.
Not a whole lot. And we've got things that we want to accomplish.
They might not hear it good because it's going fast. I don't know. Let's see.
And recently I had a debate. Pritchett had a debate. We've been able to travel and speak in various places.
Is this okay? Yeah, that sounds bad. Kind of like if your kids are disobedient, you stone them to death. Okay, if you commit adultery, you stone. But interestingly, if you look at King David, for example, and maybe people are going to say, well, he's the king, so he gets an exception or whatever. Adulterer was never stoned. Kids were horrible, some of them.
Okay, we're not in the vein.
Let me just say this though. When I first began to study this subject, I'll admit I was a little bit, I didn't think we had a really good answer. Like I thought.
Let's stop there. All right, on Braxton, because I don't know where his arguments come up, but you can see he's leading up to, but we do have a good answer. And do they really have a good answer? You were
yes. Yeah. So the just for the audience, what he said was, when I first started to study this, I didn't think we had a really good answer for the problem. And as Derek's saying, it seems like what he's leading up to is that we do. By the way, I listened to this video maybe a year ago, I think. And I actually messaged Braxton and said, hey, if you ever want me to come on and have a conversation with both you guys about my thoughts on this, not that I'm the expert on this. There are lots of people that are much better equipped to talk about the topic, but I said I'd be happy to do that. And he said he would think about it or talk to the other guy that I can't remember his name now, or something like that. So we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation even with them on MythVision, because there's a lot that could be discussed. We're only talking about, slavery here. There's just a bunch of different topics that could be discussed. And what I liked about our friend Jay who came on, it sounds like I mentioned this earlier, he's aware of the documentary hypothesis. He understands that it takes source material, that there's more than one source. You've got the Deuteronomic reformer source, if you will. You have the Leviticus or the priestly. You have all these sources that we're looking at, and Christians just one package, one book, magical fingers or magical pen that just, and that's going to be a problem, I think. It's why they run to places and have to make it say something that's going to work for a 21st century audience.
And again, so that we're clear, like, this is not always, but quite often, a particular type of Christian that holds sort of tenaciously to these things. So as the more you get sort of fundamentalist on that scale, on that spectrum, Mosaic authorship becomes much more important. And it's true. There's a recent volume that came out 2020, I think. And Richard Averbeck has an article in there, but it's published at Eisenbrauns. But it's sort of like an evangelical approach to some of these formation of the Pentateuch problems. And of course, they take a more conservative view of it. And, so there's some interplay, right? Like Averbeck is dealing in his article, for example, with what Jay was talking about and the developments between the Covenant Code and, the Deuteronomist, and then, finally the Holiness Code in Leviticus. And, he's addressing a particular development that's seen there. And he, Averbeck posits, well, I don't think we necessarily need to see this as a development. And of course, the sort of a motivation behind this is theological, I think. And that doesn't nullify his argument. I don't agree with his argument, but it's important to recognize that it's on a spectrum.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. Let's move on to what do you meme? I think it'll be interesting bringing him up. And I see a couple people mentioning the sound. I hope this is coming through enough to where you guys can actually hear it. I apologize if it's not that great. Let me move up here to what do you meme? What did he title this? Here we go. All right, guys, let's try it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you can hear it. Audio's turned up on this, as you guys see. This is everything I got.
So Cosmic Skeptic is a popular YouTube atheist who came out with a new video called How the Bible Supports Slavery. Now, personally, I tend to like the kid, which is why I regret having to make this video. So towards the beginning of the video, he makes the argument that God is the OG slave owner, right?
Would it be cheap of me to point out that Christians believe themselves to be in absolute subjection to the divine? And so, yes, God literally did invent slavery, himself being the first and eternal slaver of mankind.
And not just that, God is far worse than any human slave owner in history. And his slavery is the kind of slavery that's far worse than the kind of slavery that was used during the slave trade. And yes, he's serious. So to try to show that God's not only a cosmic slave owner, but also one that's far worse than any slave master in history could ever dream of, he tries to illustrate this with the following analogy.
Now imagine the slaver in the slave trade again. His slave is on his knees in front of the slaver, and the slaver offers him an ultimatum. This is your last chance, he says. I'm going to give you a choice. You continue to work the fields for me without pay, or I'll lock you and your family up and whip you 100 times.
Sounds like we're having technical difficulties, bro.
Yeah, I did. So I did a 3-part response to actually this video series by What Do You Mean on the channel. So if people are interested in like a full development of that, you know, take a look. I think there's a playlist that Megan made. But like his points are, there are a lot of them because it's a 3-part video series. So I think it would be tough to kind of to work through them. But they're sort of standard, right? There's I think he brings up Deuteronomy 23:15-16, where if a slave runs away, then he doesn't get returned to his master, and of course that's a big deal in this discussion. If you read Tikva Frymer-Kensky's article on Israel, law in Israel in Westbrook's 2001, that major ancient Near Eastern law 2-volume set, Frymer-Kensky, says when she gets to that point, she says, well, if this actually did mean that any slave that ran away would be, it would be illegal to return them to their master. She said it would completely undermine and do away with the entire slavery system, right? Which is one of the reasons, certainly not the primary reason, but one of the reasons that leads scholars to go, is that really what that means? So, I mean, we could talk about those sorts of things, but again, really what I find difficult, and actually, if you want to read those.
No, what you find difficult, go ahead, and then we'll get Ben's question, and then I'm going to try something different. Hopefully we can get this audio where we want it, because I want you guys to hear what they say.
Yeah.
I don't want to straw man anyone. I'm purposely wanting to still man what they are presenting and what they think. But then obviously someone like you who studies in an academic setting, who knows what scholarship says, who knows the ancient Near East, and the other Christian guy who agrees with you on these things. Yeah. We're going to get to that. So anyway.
I think the most problematic thing that I wrestle with often in these discussions and these debates is the way that primary passage, Leviticus 25:44-46, is dealt with. Because what ends up happening almost always in these discussions is there's an appeal to Matthew 19, like, hey, look what Jesus said about divorce, to the Pharisees, and did that, allowed writing a bill of divorcement because of the hardness of their hearts. And so, divorce is not God's ideal. And so then they broadly apply that. Well, that must be the case with something like slavery. And of course, there's no direct connection there. But then once that is sort of laid as the backdrop, then they go to things, like, well, look, it says here that the foreigner is supposed to be cared for. I mean, look at these verses, in Exodus 12 or in Exodus, there's lots of different places where it comes up. Leviticus 19:33-34 is usually one that's thrown out. And it says, look, you got to care for the foreigner, you got to love the foreigner. And so, it's sort of like trying to set this this background, this backdrop, so that when they get to the difficult passage, you have all this other stuff in your mind, which is fine. Like I'm fine with that. But But then when you get to the difficult passages, like Exodus 21, 20 to 21, where it says if a man beats his male or female slave with a rod and they die immediately or under his hand, then they are to be punished, whatever nakam means there. Probably killed, but it's not certain. And but then verse 21, but if he survives a day or two, then there is to be no punishment. He's not to be punished because he's his money, his silver, his property. Any of those are fine. And that's a tough one, right? And what I hear usually is, that look at this, like this is this is elevating the slave's rights because look, if he gets killed, then the master gets killed. And it's like, yes, that's true. But we kind of want to focus on the other couple of things, like he's a slave or she's a slave, right? And it's expected that they're going to be beaten, right? So like these are things that I think instead of focusing in on the things that are difficult in the passage, they sort of come at it very often, trying to highlight the good
as if
things.
If you kill, like if you end up killing your slave and that now puts you to death, therefore the slave has this great independence or some form of like freedom in some way, or they have some importance equal to the owner or something like that. That's what it kind of sounds like. Or they start with something that kind of rises up what a slave really is to make them more than that. Don't get me wrong, there's rules, there's laws and things like that. But anyway, Ben's question, and then I'm going to turn this AC off. I'm going to try and play with this audio while we have this going, and we'll play another clip, but we got some super chats going. Ben says, during periods where Israel annexed Judah as a vassal, were Judahites considered foreigners or locals? Could an Israelite keep a Judahite as chattel? Interesting.
That is a really interesting question.
Especially since most of the literature, when you look at the documentary hypothesis, comes around the time where the United Monarchy is no longer necessarily on the scene, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, if you're asking that theologically, which I don't think you are, Ben, I don't know the answer. I'd have to think about that. Given that the Holiness Code is so late, I suspect what we're, looking at this from, a sort of a one-sided perspective. I don't know that would factor in, but that's interesting. I've never thought of that. That's an interesting question.
Good question. Thanks, Ben. I wouldn't know what to say because just like Ben was there when Joel Baden was on, and he knows the documentary hypothesis. He's the guy.
Ben's sharp.
Yeah,
Ben's sharp.
Ben shows up everywhere, Ben. Ben, you've been everywhere. No, it's interesting to ask that question, especially when some scholars don't even think technically there was a united monarchy necessarily between northern and southern kingdoms. So are they separate? Are they really united? Were there really 12 tribes? I mean, so many questions to ask and not enough solid evidence. Tacit
reticence.
Is it Captain Ahab or King Ahab, Dr. Josh? Good. Thanks for the super chat, y'all.
I was chatting with him earlier, and sort of like your slip up in that video where you said the digital law of Hammurabi or something like that.
Yeah, digital Hammurabi.
I said we were talking about Moby Dick, and I said, so King Ahab, and I went, no, wait, because I'm thinking of King Ahab, in the Hebrew Bible. Ahab. So,
thank you for the super chat. Jordan Kelt, super chat. What does the archaeological evidence say about slavery in ancient Israel and the Levant, Dr. Josh? Yeah,
it's the archaeology specifically. I feel like that would probably be a tough thing to get at. So, if we're including in archaeology like textual evidence, we have some. So there's a book that was published by the Oriental Institute in 2011, I think. That was edited together by Laura Culbertson, and she has an article. I think she's the one that has the article in there about the trying to look at what we have from that the period. I think she's looking at the Elephantine papyri, but I can't remember specifically. But she's trying to draw on what meager evidence we have outside of the biblical text, and trying to establish like from what we see, for example, in the Neo-Babylonian period during the period of the exile. What do we see from Judean colonies that are there? It's tough. I don't know that I have a good answer. Certainly not something that I've spent a lot of time looking at.
Right. I do enjoy what we've done on that show, and we'll play clips from it, but how ancient Near Eastern laws, codes, the Digital Hammurabi code, Hammurabi code and whatnot, how there is a overlap. And to assume the way that Jay answered it, and he's a Christian, but he's 6 years, he said, he's been working down in Texas on his PhD, his dissertation on this topic, dealing with 6 crimes, sexual crimes in the ancient Near East. And he is showing that when I asked him this question, like, is there plagiarism? Are they borrowing? Well, he's like, you wouldn't necessarily need plagiarism because they're all like bumping shoulders, so to speak. It's in the air. Everyone's practicing similar things, but in particular regions, you do have particular laws. And I suspect the biblical law, what gets interesting about this is there might have been certain practices, and he's not even sure that they were really practicing some of these things. Like, he even admits, based on his scholarly approach, that the Old Testament doesn't have one message. It changes. Right. We already knew that, but it was amazing to hear that come from the mouth of Jay, who is like literally 1 point up on the side of us and, 10 points down on the apologist side. And it's like, the other day, I have to say this before we get to the next video that I want to play a clip of. I was watching the video with Professor Falk, the Egyptologist, on Capturing Christianity. And I was like, one of the things that really blew me away, and I don't have, dude, I want to interview Dr. Falk. I want to learn from him, because if he thinks there really was an Exodus, and what is your approach? I want to hear your evidence, all that stuff. But what really got me was the response from Capturing Christianity was, what's the documentary hypothesis?
Yeah.
He didn't even know. And what really blew me away about that is, like, it shows when you're wearing that certain hat and you're wearing those certain glasses, you really just avoid it. In fact, all you got to do is turn to the top dogs like Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser, who's actually a pretty brilliant guy when it comes to knowing a lot of languages. I listened to his video response, 10-minute clip on YouTube about the documentary hypothesis. He does not agree with the documentary hypothesis. And I was like, what? And this is a guy who's like dealing with source material, but he is an apologist to some degree. Yeah. So,
I mean, yeah, like if I'm remembering correctly, Michael Heiser was trained by Michael Fox out at Wisconsin-Madison. I mean, like he's very well trained. I don't think there's any question that he's very well trained. Okay. He's clearly very bright.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean that to sound like, anyway.
No,
I respect him. I really do.
It's I don't think it's about intelligence. I think it's about willingness to accept the reality. And that's why I titled this thumbnail, Let's Keep It Real. We're going to keep it real.
Yeah.
And the reality is, figure out, let the facts be the facts. Don't manipulate the facts to try and make something not what it is. So thanks for the super chat, Jordan. I appreciate it, man. And let's go ahead and try this audio again. Let me
go ahead and keep going. I can still hear you. I'll be right back.
Yep. All right. I'm going to play this clip here, guys. This is Mike Winger, and he's like preaching a sermon or something here. And I want to see, I'm going to pay attention to your guys' comments. Let me know if you can hear this clear.
Well, how did slavery exist typically in Israel back in the day? It was actually an indentured servitude. It was less than a slavery, like you are kidnapped and brought over and you're put into service. Rather, it was more of an indentured servitude, or a work for a contract period of time. It really was. It was a contracted period of time. It was voluntary rather than starving. I would say, hook myself up with someone who had the money. I would say, I will serve you for X number of years if you provide for me housing and clothing and perhaps a wage above and beyond that. You can think of Jacob and Laban as being an example of this. Jacob leaves, Esau's chasing him. He's got nothing, just the clothes on his back, basically. He finds Laban. He ends up coming into a 7-year contract with him. 7 years was the maximum, right? And then so he gets in the 7-year contract with him, and then he gets his pay, changes. And Laban was a bad owner. He would have been rebuked under the old.
Look, man, I got this thing at 1.5 speed, and he just said 7 years is the max. It's so funny. Like, if you could find the best spot in the Old Testament that helps support your view, If it says a slave should be released after 7 years, let's divorce the context before and after that statement. Let's apply that universally to all slavery everywhere we find it. Oh, look, a slave wasn't supposed to be owned for more than 7 years. And Dr. Josh and other scholars have come on and said, no, there are lifelong slaves. In fact, there are slaves that will be inherited by your children. Like, there's no releasing some of these slaves. So why are we? Well, I know why. It's harmonization, but it's also dumbing down the reality of how horrific our ancient world really was on these topics.
But I mean, this is sort of the one of the other points. Like, if you notice what he's doing, I think he's probably being careful about how he says this. But he's saying, like, in Israel, and I wonder if what he means by in Israel is like for fellow Israelites, because this is true, right? For the most part, what he said is true. It's a little different. It's not like most of this debt servitude that we see, this debt slavery, for example, that we see in Exodus 21 is arguably like, so let's say you're a creditor, right? And we see this everywhere in the ancient Near East. It's not just in Israel. But you're a creditor, and let's say I come to you and I say, hey, I need to have a loan from you of grain for the upcoming year. And so you loan me grain, and it's loaned at 33% interest or something. Well, then I go and I plant all that with the assumption that I'm going to have a yield enough that I'm going to be able to pay you back what I borrowed from you. But then I'm going to have enough, to make that profitable, like any other loan that you would take out. Well, of course, you have a bad year, and now not only can you not support yourself, but now I don't even have enough to pay you back. So the creditor now has a right to take you or a member of your family, if you're operating as the paterfamilias. You can say, all right, take my daughter, take my slave, whatever, as this into debt servitude. And the idea here is that that 6-year term of service that you see in Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 15 is enough to pay back both the loan and any interest and any other additional expenses that would have come, compounded over that 6-year period. It suffices it, right? It's done. And the problem is that that's bad. That's bad. I don't, and certainly eventually, the Israelites thought that this was bad, at least those that wrote the Holiness Code, because they do away with it, right? Just as Jay said in the stream, like, they do away with it for their own people. No, you can't keep Israelites as debt slaves anymore. But again, it's sort of focusing on the milder form of these, right?
Right.
Instead of
the latest version, if we can, or what appears to be the latest version, the nicest version. And this was something that we mentioned, but it's like, now you can't own an Israelite, woman or male, but the other nations, that's still a green light. And so, sure, that's better, I guess, in some respects, but is it really? And for me, I just have a hard time believing it, because right there, you might have reasons for this being xenophobic or some form of, we are a superior chosen people, our tribe is the right. We shouldn't treat God's, people in this respect. We should be rising above this, and everyone else is like less than, they're wild beast. But don't feel bad. I mean, the pagans did the same thing, guys. I'm not like, I wasn't a pagan. I didn't worship Zeus. Nobody's knocking on my door saying, have you accepted Zeus into your heart as your Lord and Savior? If not, lightning will find you. No, this is people who are condemning you to hell, who are running around saying, look, you're desperately wicked. And if you do not accept these particular moral codes and this God and this book, you're going to find yourself cooked forever by a loving God. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, we don't really see what you're saying now. I used to believe that. But anyways, I want to continue with Mike here, and I slowed it down so everyone can absorb what he's saying, and then just yell at me, Josh. Say, hey, stop right there.
Old Testament law. But there's an example of how somebody moved into that position. It was caused by poverty, not racial status.
Okay, pause real quick. My question: slavery across the board. Let's go ahead and universal. It's all just caused by poverty, Dr. Josh. Is that the case for slavery?
No,
or is there many reasons for slavery?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably, to be charitable, I think if you were to ask Mike that, he'd probably say, well, no, I mean, obviously it's not as, but no, there are lots of different ways that, somebody can become a slave. But poverty is certainly one of them. And poverty is probably not the right way to say that. It's, it's defaulting on a debt is what we see quite often. There's famine slavery. I mean, certainly that's the case. But really the way that people become slaves is, in my opinion, in this discussion, somewhat of a red herring. It's not really relevant, as is this comment about it not being racially motivated. I'd want to know what he means by that specifically, right. But it's ethnically motivated, and not that matters at all. I think slavery is slavery. So, if you take someone as a chattel slave, for whatever reason, because they have blonde hair, I don't think there's any good reason to do that, right? So no, but I mean, the way the biblical texts set this up, particularly in Leviticus 25, is that are they foreigners? Are they people that are either dwelling in the land, foreigners that are dwelling in the land, usually as tenant farmers, or are they just from the nations around you? So, their ethnicity I think the technical sense of that term, they're not Israelites.
And that does matter.
It does. Absolutely. Yeah. So
all right, I'm going to continue. And look, I'm going to run and turn my air on. I'm in a garage. In case everyone knows, I'm prepping for Hades. Okay. It's just super hot air in North Carolina. So I'm just trying to get my skin prepared for the flames. I'm just teasing. Let me hit the AC unit over here and I'll be right back, and tell me when to stop.
Racial status, but by poverty. There was no rape involved in God's regulations of slavery. Firstly, because rape was punishable by death, and you had the same law for the slave as you did for the free in Israel. There was also no sex outside of marriage.
Want me to pause already?
So there would be no outside of marriage.
Yeah, I mean,
can you get 5 seconds in and not have to? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So, I mean, so that everybody is aware, Caballero is writing his dissertation. He's just about done with it. On sexual crimes, right? Sex crimes in the ancient Near East and Hebrew Bible. So if you have a question, about whether you're allowed to rape, and I feel like there's some what's the word? Not ambiguity, but there's some why can't I think of the term? Where you say one thing, but yeah, anyway, I can't think of what it is. What do we mean by rape here? So if I were to say it's illegal to murder someone in the Hebrew Bible, yes, that's absolutely true. But you can't say it's illegal to murder, therefore God didn't kill anyone in the flood, right? Now, we today would call that murder. I mean, many of us would. Or going in 1 Samuel 15, for example, and killing men, women, children, infants, that we would consider that today to be murder. But you can't say, well, it was illegal to murder, so that can't be murder. That's not how that works. Equivocation. That's what the word I was thinking of. Yeah, ambiguity as well. But I think equivocation was the one that I was going for. So the issue here with rape, for example, is we're not using rape as they defined it, right? And that I think we have to be clear about. This is why setting definitions is really important. So what did they consider to be rape? Well, if you ask, you talk to Jay, and not just Jay, but I mean, like any ancient Near Eastern scholar or biblical scholar, consent is not like a thing. right? Consent really isn't a thing for women. So if you read through Deuteronomy 21, let's do away with what we think about. Do away with the word rape. Let's just describe what it is that's happening. Deuteronomy 21. This is in the context of how to go to war with Israel's enemies. And it says, if you see among the captives a beautiful woman and you wish to have her for yourself, to take her as a wife, here's how you do it, right? You give her 30 days to mourn her family because you've killed them. And she goes through a ritual, like a purification style ritual, and then she becomes your wife. So, is that rape? By their standards, no. By our standards, find somebody that says no. That's not, doesn't have a motivation here, because this is not her consent is not the issue. And people, of course, want to try to spin this and say, well, what are you going to do? Leave her there for dead? Or what are you going to do? Yeah, I mean, it's that red herring, right? If you're trying to establish, would we call that rape today? And would that be good for us to practice today? The answer is no. Anybody that's watched Law and Order SVU and has seen, somebody come in and like kill a family and steal a kid, and then, 25 years later, you find out that, he's had her, chained up in the basement for a little while or whatever. And then, she's brainwashed now, living with him as his wife. Nobody goes, oh, well, I mean, he rescued her from the house. Where he didn't kill her. He could have just left the kid there to die. I mean, it was actually a merciful thing what he did. Like, we'd go, shut up. Ain't nobody talking to you. So I think these are, again, from an apologetic standpoint, I feel like the goal is to sort of highlight all the things that we think make it look less bad than what it was.
And they would say we're highlighting the things that make it worse.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think nothing is further from the truth. I feel like the whole point of engaging on this topic is not to highlight all the bad stuff. I mean, when we had that conversation with Jay, the last question was, let's make sure we have this balanced. What are the things that the Hebrew Bible does right? Like, what are the progressive things?
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's
argue that from two angles, right? So one angle, the Christian might try to argue progressive revelation, or like an incline towards a better, I guess you'd say, moral compass for humanity or whatnot. God's allowing free will to reign, which is why the heart's desperately wicked and causing man to do what they're doing, owning people, doing these horrific acts. And I said, if I were to try and be a Christian, I'd have to be open theist probably, because I just couldn't see how God would allow or even be okay and condone. All right, here's the rules for the horrible stuff you guys are doing to one another. These are the limits and boundaries that I'm not okay with. Okay. But you can practice these things as long as you live within these boundaries. And I guess being anachronistic looking today, we know from our experience how we view owning humans or how we treat other people. Some people are trying to do this with, should we be, vegan, so like, should we be eating animals? Like, so, the evolution of our moral code, I think, is continuously taking place. Real quick here, Jim Majors, how thankful were the women for their captors taking them in after their families were killed? They would have had a bad life otherwise, right?
Yeah, I mean, spot on.
Jim, he's been on the show before too, man, and we talked about Daniel. Daniel's his thing, and
sharp.
Yeah, very sharp. But I'm going to continue Mike Winger, and then you just yell at me. And if we get too many stops, I mean, then I'll just go to another apologist so we don't dwell too much. But Mike Winger, like, it's like anything to present this to an audience of Christians in a church so that it like shows that the Bible's good. It's not showing any wrong or bad. Like he kind of paints this picture. But
and I don't think we've said this like overtly. And I think we probably should. If I would be very happy to have any of these apologists, if they feel like we're misrepresenting them, or whatever. They just want to talk about it. I'm sure that you would be very happy to have them come on here. And
absolutely, man. I've got some of my best friends are Christians. My mom just wrote me. I told you this before we got on the live. Derek, she just left church. She's on the West Coast, so she's 3 hours behind. It's like 12 o'clock noon or something like that. She said, Derek, thank you for teaching me all the Bible stories growing up. Because I got into it so much. My family went to church, but didn't really read the Bible, study the Bible, that kind of stuff. And I said, no problem, Mom. And I thought about that in light of our conversation. I said, wow, when I read these stories, like I thought it was great that God led Israel into Egypt, making them slaves so that he could show his power when he freed them. Like, yeah. And now I'm looking at it going, wow, it's a different world that we live in now, like completely different world. And I thought being raised in this book, that was my clan. That was my book. That was my story. So I saw it being taught from the pulpit, taught by the people who came before me in a positive light. Yeah. And I never thought to myself, why does God keep having Israel get captured and destroyed? I mean, Israel, Egypt, Assyria, Medes, Persians, Greece, Babylon, Rome, like it just doesn't stop. When are they ever going to sit on Mount Zion and say to the world, come, we'll teach you the laws of Yahweh? It's never happened. And I'm sorry, I hate to say it, not trying to be rude, but I don't see it happening. This is an old story. And I think they're trying to justify why they've been in these type of situations. I now see totally different. I'd read the book, the Bible, as one unified message, and I'd like see God like showing mercy and then showing wrath and showing mercy. But I felt like he was a father who was just trying to keep him on the right path and do the right thing. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, why didn't I see these things this way?
Yeah.
All right. Mike Winger. Sorry.
Whether they were a slave or not a slave.
We can't see it, by the way.
And if they were married.
Here I am. Can you hear
it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me do this here.
Just can't see it. That's all. There you go.
The eyes of faith. You could have. No, I'm just kidding.
A master or whatever you want to call him married the servant girl, then the Bible requires that he give her the full status of a wife, and he's not allowed to just divorce her. So he can't do this like one night stand kind of thing. No, he has to give her the full status of a wife. So it actually elevated her rights dramatically.
Well, I mean, if he's talking about Exodus 21, 7-11, I mean, certainly scholars, are divided on that topic. I think most would see the Amma being sold into slavery there as a concubine. Right? I think Jay talked about that in the stream that we did with him. Now, there's no question that the way that the text deals with her, it's set up to be in her favor in the sense that if the man takes the daughter for, or this maid for himself, that if he takes another wife, he can't just stop supporting her. He has to support her, and there are 3 things that are listed. But if he fails to support her with those things, he must allow her to be redeemed. And scholars have pointed out that there is no language about a wife here. There's no bill of divorcement, for example, that's given. It's just, you either continue to support her as a concubine or you allow her to be redeemed. But again, there are people that have different positions on that. But the point is that this idea of having her elevated to the full status of a wife, I'm not sure I know what he means by that. But I don't think that you can see that specifically in the text. And it does seem like this is concubinage. And particularly when you compare it to or juxtapose it with the laws that came before about the male slave. So,
thank you, Dr. Josh.
Sure.
Kidnaps a man and sells him, or
so he's
if he's
in
found
that
in
Exodus.
his hand,
Let's skip ahead a little.
This one law, this single law, would make New World slavery completely impossible.
Well, that's nonsense.
Because so much of it was fueled by kidnapping.
You already know what he's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, well, anyway, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll fast forward it and keep going.
Or if he's found in his hand, he shall be put to death. So you could be the guy that has these slaves on your plantation, and you're like, well, I didn't kidnap him. Tough. This would not work.
he's trying to use it to try and like say we could have condemned all the slavery that was going on here in the antebellum slavery here in America using the Bible. I know many slave owners that you read about use the Bible to condone and supply their message for why they have slaves, So
and if you want to make that argument, I mean, you can say that you could utilize a wide variety of ancient Near Eastern, and I think even Roman, legal systems. If that's the point that you're trying to make, it's illegal to steal things. It's like this isn't something that's unique to the Hebrew Bible. So
I agree. Real quick, I do want to address Otangelo. I'm not going to get into the presuppositional morality arguments and get lost in this whole, well, what are your absolute objective moral values? Do you think you're more moral than God, Dr. Josh, according to the Old Testament?
Do I think I'm more moral?
I said yes, but that's just because of our standards. And then again, I understand we've evolved. And so it's a whole different approach, I would suggest.
If we're assuming, I think I know what yes. I mean, I would say that the things that are, I think that our moral standards today have evolved far beyond,
right.
Things like endorsing slavery or taking captive wives or,
right.
Virgin women as plunder, those sorts of things.
He's taking that other approach once again, putting on the glasses, starting with God is right, no matter what he does, no matter what happens, no matter what's permitted, we got to find an excuse. Free will. That's why man did this, and God didn't want to correct slavery, so he just condoned it and worked within the confines of it, stuff like that. So I'm pretty bold about saying that. That's just my opinion. I think that I would never try to discipline my children by slavery, murder, rape, famine, cannibalism, 70 AD, the first temple's destruction, you name it, to try and teach them a lesson. We don't even want to spank our kids anymore. We realize the damage that it does. Yeah. And so, we could talk all the stuff we want, but you get into these whole, what's your objective moral standards and this and that. I personally do believe that it's subjective, but it's also cultural. It's not like an individual necessarily. I do think there's a cultural aspect to morality. Anyway, super chat from Spartan Theology, which you were on last night. Everyone go subscribe to his channel.
That's great.
He is an awesome guy, and he is a Christian, but he's like a very, very cool, open, I'm ready to have a conversation and learn from the scholars, and I really appreciate the live last night. Dr. Josh, please talk about how the way MW is reading the law as a book of codes to abide by is just flat out nonsense.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this on the stream last night. It was a lot of fun. Ethan's a great guy. Really, really had a lot of fun. This is part of the issue of, I think, this certain type of inerrancy and inspiration. So if you're coming to the Hebrew Bible, viewing it as, the Word of God, as the narrative, I think, wants you to view it, as the Word of God, the laws of God handed down from on high to Moses, and put forth to the nation of Israel. Then you're looking at this and saying, okay, well, these are the laws that the Israelites had to abide by. This was legislation, right? And I think what Ethan's getting at is, we know reasonably well that in the ancient Near East, these law collections, these law codes, did not function as legislation in this way. And so when scholars come to legal texts like this, even in the Hebrew Bible, we're not looking at these. In other words, we're not adopting the narrative's hermeneutic. We're not reading it specifically like the narrative wants us to in adopting that God wrote this, that these are supernatural things that are being handed down. In the same way, if somebody were to look at the Iron Man movies, there's a certain way that the producer or whatever wants you to view reality inside of the Iron Man movies. And if you're looking at that critically, which, I mean, I doubt many people do, because there's no need to, but if you were to look at that critically, you would say, okay, Like, here are some problems with it, but you don't think about those things if you're taking it as the narrative. So I don't think that anybody should be going to the laws of the Hebrew Bible and saying, all right, this is our moral code that we need to be, lining ourselves up with. And certainly we know from the ancient Near East that this isn't how those law collections function. But again, in this narrative, I think that's what the text is trying to get you to do. But I think reading it critically takes you another direction.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. We'll do a little more here with Mike Winger, and then I'll jump to some other guys.
What about abuse? What about when the slaves were being abused? Well, Exodus 21, verse 26 and 27, it says, if a man strikes the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it or damages their eyes so they can't see, he shall let them go free for the sake of his eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he shall let him go free for the sake of his tooth. Now, is God only concerned with eyes and teeth? Or it seems to be that the point is, if he does some sort of serious permanent bodily harm to this person, although you wouldn't consider losing a tooth to be seriously, but your point is it demonstrates abuse, then he goes free. They go free. They break the contract and they go completely free. This also.
You want to make a quick comment on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing to remember about verses 26 and 27 is that the slave is not due Lex Talionis. That's the point of those verses being put in there. So, if you look at the way many ancient Near Eastern laws are structured, they're based on this law of retribution, right? Obviously, not all of them all the time, whatever, but it's a significant aspect, right? So if you read the laws of Hammurabi, if an awilu, like a free man, a citizen, however you want to translate that, knocks out the eye of another citizen, another awilu, well, then his eye will be put out. And so the idea here, and Martha Roth has, I know I always talk about this, but Martha Roth recently, the past couple of years, did a brilliant, I think, paper on this. And it's on the Oriental Institute's YouTube channel, where she talks about Lex Talionis and how it's actually used. And I think she presents it very, very well. And the idea is, how do you determine what the value of an eye is worth, right? The eyeball, let's say you knock my eye out. We're both free citizens, and you come up and you knock my eyeball out, and the eyeball is lying there. How do we determine the value of that act? How do I get retribution? How do you make me whole? Can't put my eye back in, right? I can't take your eye and put it in. That's not going to work. And so how do we set that value? And the bigger problem is, let's say I'm in a very technical trade that my eyes are very, very important. They make me a lot of money. And you're like a, 60-year-old man in this period, and you're having a tough time getting around, and you have glaucoma, and like your eye isn't, it's not worth all as much as mine was, right? How do you assess value? How do you assess the value of that eye? Well, this is what she argues Lex Talionis does. So if you knock my eye out, I have a legal right to your eye. Well, I mean, it could do me good, like catharsis or something, to see your eye put out. But more than likely, I'm going to be interested in a monetary payment in order for you to keep your eye. So you're going to say, whoa, okay, I'm really sorry. Hey, I tell you what, I'll give you $10,000 to be able to hang on to my eye. And I go, 10,000, I know, give me the eye. Oh, okay, 50,000, right? And when we reach the number that you're willing to pay to hang on to your eyeball, that's how you assess the value of it. So now the reason that I say all of that is that the debt slave here, which is probably what this is, a debt slave, is not due Lex Talionis. They're not due. They don't have a right.
A contract, so to speak, right?
Well,
he's a debt slave. He's not.
This is a debt slave. So let's set up. It's difficult to assess,
right?
Specifically, if this is a debt or a chattel slave. I tend to think it's a debt slave because of the parallels that we see in other Near Eastern law codes, legal collections. But the point is that here, let's set this up. So I take a loan of grain out from you. I can't pay it back. You say, you're going to be my slave for the next 6 years, right? And I come and I work for you. Well, you beat me, right? Which is what you're supposed to do. Read Proverbs 29, everybody. But let's say you get carried away and you start to abuse me and you put out my eye or you knock out my tooth. By the way, serious offenses, if you read through the other, legal sections in the ancient Near East, 60 shekels of silver, 30 shekels of silver. Like that's, I think, I can't remember, don't quote me anybody. I think 10 shekels a year of silver was like an average wage, like 10 shekels a year. So 60 shekels is 6 years of service, right? I mean, so anyway, the point is that I don't get to look at you as the debt slave to the master and say, all right, I have a right to your eye. Because I'm a debt slave. My compensation is I get to go free. My debt is wiped clean. I don't have a right to your eye. And this is the part that I think is really important to recognize. Is the slave due Lex Talionis? No. Wow. So what do we do? Well, they're just released and not just. I mean, I don't want to make that sound like it's a little thing, but they are released.
Freedom, though. That's pretty crazy. Their eye, a tooth. Without your tooth in the ancient world, they didn't have fake teeth. They couldn't put a tooth back in your mouth. So you're going to have a hard time eating the older you get, chewing your meat because they ate meat, lots of things. But I think it's interesting to say it's almost, this isn't a job. Like you went to McDonald's to go to work and a guy cut your finger off. Okay. And it's like, well, since I cut your finger off, you don't have to work here. Well, I'm not going to get paid if I don't work here anymore.
Right.
And that's what Mike Winger's trying to say in a sense. Oh, they're being paid and they're making good money. And this is like a contract and they're just debt slaves somewhat. And well, you took his eye out. You know what? Now you're free. That would make no sense if he's making money and he's able to do well. And this is something great for him. So yeah, there's seems to be differences between slavery. But Arjun, thank you for the super chat. Orthodox Jews tend to creatively turn, I think he means to say, the slavery passages into something positive. Do they have a point, e.g. from the Mishnah, or are they creative? Yeah, I mean, it would be, I think, probably the best thing to do. There's a friend of mine, Brack, whom I need to actually get back in contact with. But Brack is an Orthodox Jew and getting his PhD and just a brilliant, super nice guy. But like I've had these conversations with him, and this is a place where I think Orthodox, you need to. I think the best thing to do would be to engage with them about this and talk to them about it. But absolutely, if you read through, sort of what the rabbis have said about these passages, and this is not my field of expertise, so nobody should. Actually, a place to go. Sorry, Samuel Gringus. Grengus, in 2011, wrote a book, Laws in the Hebrew Bible or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but you'll see it. And he deals with ancient Near Eastern law, biblical law, and then what the rabbis did, the rabbinic law. And it's excellent book. I highly recommend it to everybody that are interested in this topic. But what they're doing is they're looking at the text and harmonizing it. In many cases, right? They're wrestling with how can Deuteronomy 15 say something that Exodus 21 seems to say something different. Right? They're harmonizing these passages. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very fair thing to say, is that they're trying to do something similar. It's a type of apologetics. I think they obviously come to very different conclusions, but real quick, Jim Wisman, please send your question again. I must have missed your super chat. So if I somehow missed it, I apologize. I will get your question asked. Real quick, our word retaliation is derived from Talionis. Yeah. Thank you, Tacit. I appreciate the super chat. Interesting.
So yeah, like Lex is law, and then Talionis is like retaliation, the law of retaliation.
Interesting. Thank you.
So you can hear talion, retaliation, talion. Anyway.
Okay, I'll be looking for your question, and until the question comes up, I will go ahead and play some more of this here.
be really protective and really actually elevating the rights.
I'm going to skip ahead a little.
Servant penalty, and that applies if they're a slave or if they're not. Loss of a tooth, loss of the.
You're still going on about that tooth, man.
Track. Here's your money. Bye. I'm out. And so it becomes a protective device for the servants.
Right. There's no question.
Verses 15 and 16.
Sorry. I mean, so just very quickly.
I'm going to stop Mike Winger though. Just we're done with him, dude.
Okay. But this is boy. I'm trying to think of a parallel. Oh, here's a good one. I mean, did you know that in the antebellum South it was illegal to abuse your slave? Did you know that? It was illegal. And did you know that it was illegal to murder your slave? It was illegal. And did you know that if you were found guilty, particularly leading up to the Civil War, so like, post-revolution, did you know that if you murdered a slave, that in many of the states, probably most, I think, don't quote me on that, but in many of the states, if it was determined that you murdered your slave, it would be as if you killed a free white man. Did you know that?
Interesting.
I mean, so slavery, must not have been that bad in the antebellum South? Well, how does that follow? I mean, if you read through, and this is, by the way, I talk about this in my new book in the slavery chapter. We get into the antebellum South, but people should go pick up the book by Thomas Morris, and it's like slave. I need to memorize the titles of books because it's so not helpful. But it's like slave laws, Southern slave laws, or something like that. But he goes into how it is that the judges wrestled with these things. Well, I mean, of course they have to be able to the masters have to be able to beat their slaves. How else would you keep them in line? But then this is what they're thinking. This is how they're wrestling with this. But they can't abuse them, right? They got to be able to beat them, but they can't abuse them. So how do we balance this out, right? How do we work with this? And so to point out things like, yeah, the law elevates the rights of the slaves. Well, guess what? That happened in the antebellum South. I mean, as Glenn Schwartz would say, yeah. What's your therefore what? There's no slavery? I mean,
yeah, this is why I love looking into this whole topic, period. I mean, and I appreciated Jay. I mean, we're going to get to Jay again. I want to highlight that point in our reaction to a guy who wants the Christian worldview, believes in Christianity, and is evangelical, but is not a fundamentalist. Yeah. And he's not going to come up with silly arguments to protect whatever system. He's going to try and make sense of the world, but as honest as he possibly can with it. Just like we want to try to, as honest as we possibly can, even though we all have bias. So that's just something we talked about at the end of that last, interview. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go to Frank Turek. We're going to do the Frank the Tank. Okay. Frank the Tank. You remember that movie? Old school?
No.
That movie was funny, dude. We're going streaking. All right. Anyone who watches that movie knows what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. Let me know if you can hear it. I hope the audio comes through like it's supposed to.
Trading is condemned in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's punishable by slave trading is condemned in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's
the ancient Near East
in the Old Testament. So the
just only in the ancient Near East is it okay, right? But
it's I don't want to say it's predictable, but maybe it's a little bit. It is
yeah. This will be the common sense view from an apologist, just what usually you're going to hear.
The slave trading we had in America, if we were living by biblical values, we would have executed slave traders.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm sorry, but if you read through, again, go get Thomas Morris's book. And what you'll see when you see these judges giving their decisions about what to do in these sort of landmark cases, what they're doing, no decent Christian, it says, would do abusive things to their slaves. But this is where the law is coming from. They're coming from this this perspective of no respectable Christian, no honest Christian would do these types of things. And then it's followed up with, but of course they have to be able to give moderate physical correction in order to keep their slaves in line. It's like,
Anyway, Jim had a question and he wanted to know, I missed his super chat. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know how I missed it, but I guess I missed it somehow. Dr. Josh, do you think woke churches, I love the woke, will ever remove pro-slavery elements from the scriptures? I think they're kind of doing that, but by defining it differently, making it mean, these are what the woke churches, I don't think that churches in the Middle Ages gave two craps about what happened in chattel slavery and sex slavery and this in the Old Testament. I don't think they cared. I think it's today's Christians who are facing a world that is becoming more moral than what we find in the Old Testament. So that's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, atheist friend of mine, pretty well known, and he said he was going to interview a pastor who was a member of the LGBTQ community. And he asked, how does that work? How do they square that off? I mean, haven't they read the Bible? Like, see what it says about it? And my response was, yeah, but I mean, they don't view the text the way that a fundamentalist Christian would. So I think that it's a great question, and that very well may happen. But I think in my opinion, what's probably more likely is there'll just be a continuation of the church that we go to, or that we went to before the pandemic. Two of the three pastors were members of the LGBTQ community. And, like when you talk about theology or doctrine, it's not really, I mean, sure, they have it, I'm sure. But I mean, like, I remember talking to one of the pastors and saying, so what was seminary like? Did you guys get into the Greek and the Hebrew? Not really. Because that's not what it's about. It's not about this holy text is to be read and understand in this inerrant sort of way. It's there's a lot of, I don't know, common sense that goes into its application. So,
Robert Mahaney, thank you so much for the $10 super chat, my friend. I appreciate it. Always coming through for MythVision podcast. You're tithing to the real church, okay? I really appreciate it, seriously. Let's go back to Frank Turek and here's some more of his, answering of whoever this gentleman is.
Ignore things in the Bible to meet your values and social values, like things like sexism and like kind of like the slavery things in the Bible, and people don't really believe in that, and that's okay to just ignore. Is that okay?
It depends on what you mean. Like, well, slavery is a question that we can take a look at, because that's an issue that comes up quite a bit, because slavery. Hang on a second, that ain't right.
Do I need to go faster?
It's only 4 minutes.
Slavery in the Bible is an issue that comes up quite a bit. So let's just spend a minute talking about. First of all, Old Testament slavery was not race-based forced servitude like we think about slavery in the United States 150 years ago.
All right. Go ahead and comment, and then I'll move forward.
I mean, red herring. Again, I said this on the phone earlier. Like, let's play it into real life today. We're going. I don't know. We're going into. There are a lot of Germans that are living in the United States, and we say we can't take an American. But if there's a German tourist, right? You can take them as a slave. That's okay. Is that okay?
It's ethnocentric. It's and it does the same thing with the laws of marriage. I mean, would Frank Turek answer this same question by saying, does Ezra and Nehemiah prohibit marriage to outsiders? I mean, look, I've read the book Goy by Adi Ophir and Ishay Rosenzweig, the leading experts on Gentiles and the birth of the Gentiles. And he points out, yeah, there were definitely people who weren't Israelites that they could marry, but they have a prohibition list of people that they cannot. And it's like, these are the no-nos. Don't touch these people. it's ethnic purity. Let me keep my seed pure, and we need to only mix with the good seed, and the bad seed is that ethnic? Well, hold on. Let's find a way to get around this one here, ladies and gentlemen. See my graph on the board?
Yeah. I mean, look, the bottom line here is that by the time you get to Leviticus 25, slavery, debt slavery, any kind of slavery for fellow Israelites is outlawed. You can't do it, right? If you're going to get a slave, they're going to be a chattel slave that's coming from the nations around them, the Goyim, or coming from tenant farmers, foreigners that are living in the midst of Israel, right? And they are kept for life, passed on as inheritance, their property, right? Mm-hmm. So however you want to, like, if it makes you feel better to say that it's not based on skin color, I don't know what I can do for you.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can do for you.
I don't know. You got to go back into your mother's womb and be born again. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway.
It was a voluntary means of working off debt or keeping captives from mustering or rebellion, which is what we still do. It's called 𝀨 in this country. We put captives there. So the kind of slavery that we're...
Oh, my God.
Hold on. I want to... We got to see your face. All right. There you go.
Okay. So, again, if we're going with the narrative, let's try to parallel it. So when we went into the Persian Gulf in Desert Storm, right? Would it have been okay if a bunch of soldiers came back with slaves, slave women, slave children? They came back and those slaves lived in their houses. They were not paid. They were not allowed to leave. And they served and were passed on as inheritance as well as their children. We okay with that? No. Oh, they're POWs, right? Which is an anachronism. And I think it's mislabeling because they're not POWs. But are we okay with that? That's because that's not 𝀨, right? Again, you'd have to argue that masses of people were brought back, and they didn't just go to 𝀨, or they didn't go to 𝀨. They went into people's houses, right?
Yeah. No,
that's
and
not.
Frank is a retired military, I believe. I met him in person, by the way, when I was still a Christian. I met him and John C. Lennox at a convention. John C. Lennox is like the mathematician that likes to argue for God's existence and stuff.
Oh, I thought he was the wrestler that did this all the time.
No, totally different guy. That guy could probably do a better job though with this argument today. No, I'm just teasing. Look, Frank was a nice guy. John was a nice guy. These guys are nice guys. It's like, how much money is being pumped into these guys that are like, just how can I protect the Bible and make Jesus true and deal with all the skeptics and whatnot that are going on today. And they love to talk about how skeptics are and these skeptics, they just want to bash the Bible. No, like once you see it, I don't know if you guys relate, but once you see the problem, you can't unsee it. You can't turn the switch back on and go, oh, it's perfectly fine. Everything's great. And in fact, it's better that the reality is actually understood, even by the Christian, than to try and reinterpret meanings and do all this changing of what it actually means or what actually happened. That's just my 2 cents. So thank you for the super chat, intermediary fossil. Thank you so much, man, for the 20. I appreciate it. Love your image there of the monk. Is that my uncle? I think you got an image of my uncle there. I appreciate it. And Constellation Pegasus, thank you. Of Hashim never changes and his laws are so great and perfect. Then why don't Jews have slaves today? There's plenty of Palestinians to choose from.
Yeah, so it's probably if, and then Hashem is the word shame in Hebrew means name, and Ha means the, so the name. So instead of saying God, they say Hashem. So it's if God ever changes. Yeah.
So slaves supposedly, would you say that Well, this is a good question to ask, I guess. When it gets into Rabbinic Judaism, is there a change taking place? Because no longer are they the guys who have a temple who are part of this whole infrastructure. I mean, I suspect 2nd and 3rd century Jews still had slaves if they had money. I don't know. I don't know when that turned off. What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly you have, as time goes by, there's sort of a development in the commentaries. Again, not my area of expertise, but Jews continued to have slaves. At what point that sort of worked itself out? That sounds weird. Changed. I'm not sure. It'd be good to speak with somebody who specializes in that.
I think I'll ask some of the experts that I talk to on, the history of Jews and go from there.
We're thinking about when we read the Bible, it's not the kind of slavery that was in the Old Testament. This was called indentured servitude, and it actually benefited the servant. If there's one particular place.
Derek, I want you to answer this one.
Really?
Did you do it? What's the response to that? The slavery that was in the Bible is voluntary indentured servitude.
So, first of all, let me move this screen here. You said voluntary indentured servitude. Well, based off our conversations with Jay, it's apparent that there's more than one version, by the way, of slavery. So he's already meshing things into one. I bet he won't say a single thing about concubines. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, who are those? What is that? Oh, that's a thing where it's a girl. Don't worry about that. Right now, we're worried about
a huge distracting thing.
Yeah. Whoa, boobies. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, like, it happens over and over and over again. That's why I asked Jay. I'm like, Jay, is slavery what it was in the ancient Near East? Like the digital Hammurabi code? You know what I mean? Is the slavery there the same in the biblical? Is it the same for the Hittites as it is? And he was like, dude, they all brush shoulders. The only difference was there was an advancement where Israel began to treat their own people better. But you've told us 100 times while you've been on the show of how the indentured servant argument doesn't work in many respects. So I'd rather you give us more detail into the actual detail of him saying that there's more than one argument for slavery, because he thinks it's just one and it's all indentured servants, which we agree that there are indentured servants. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about how voluntary it was. So first of all, in legal contracts that we see, I think we've got several up at Newsy, but certainly just in the wider ancient Near East, a lot of these contracts are entered into, and they have this this phrase in Akkadian, of my own volition, and there are clearly cases. Certainly, this is part of the contract. In the same way that if somebody takes out a loan from a loan shark, let's say, because they've fallen on really desperate times, the loan shark's probably going to put in the contract that he has, I take this of my own free will. I am not being coerced to take this loan, right? Is it really of their own volition? I mean, yes and no, because they're under duress. They wouldn't normally do this, right? So we would think about it that way. But from a legal standpoint, it's volitional. But if you read through 2 Kings 4, I think is where it's at. Yeah, the story where you've got the widow woman who was married to the prophet, and she comes out to Elijah and says, help me, because my husband, the prophet, has died, and or a servant of the prophet, whatever, and and now the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons. Now, was that volitional? Was that voluntary? Legally, yes. Right? Because the guy, when he took out the loan, knew that if he defaulted on it, that somebody would have to go be a debt slave to work off the debt. So, yeah. That's good.
Thanks for that, Ben.
But would we, like, understanding the difference between maybe practical volition and legal volition is different. Do you think the two kids and obviously the wife, they're all going, hoorah, this is here you go. And no, she's begging the prophet to deliver her from this circumstance because the creditor's getting ready to come and take away the two kids to be slaves. So that's what we mean by it was voluntary.
Yeah. That's pretty much the depth of slavery for Frank Turek. So here we go.
Place that the King James gets it exactly right is they translate the word in the Old Testament.
Yeah, dude, that right there already has you starting to crack up. Like, what's he about to say where the King James gets it exactly correct?
He doesn't even have to say anything. He doesn't have to continue. And the reason that I say that is because does he think that he is more of an authority on how the Hebrew Bible translators made decisions? Like, is he more of an authority on this? Like, the place they got it right. Like, okay. I mean, let's talk about your linguistic formal education. Like, what is it that you had? Let's tell us about your experience in translation of ancient languages for wider audiences. Then you can start to tell me about how it comes across as so arrogant.
Yeah.
One place that they got it right. Come on, son.
Dr. Price calls them spin doctors. And so, here we go.
Place that the King James gets it exactly right is they translate the word in the Old Testament not as slave, but servant, which is the way it should be.
Jeez.
Which is the way it should be translated.
Secondly,
oh my God.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm
slave trading is condemned in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's punishable by death in the Old Testament. So the kind of slave trading we had in America,
the ancient Near East
we were living by
under Roman law. But go ahead.
And of course,
biblical values, we would have executed slave traders. Okay, we were not obviously living by those values. The Bible in the Old and the New Testament teaches that all are made in the image of God. Slave and master are equally human, protected, and they're one in Christ. This is the teaching of the Old Testament and the.
Of course, they're not due Lex Talionis, and the life of a slave engored by an ox is worth 30 shekels of silver, as opposed to, demanding the life of the person, the owner of the ox that was unruly. But exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, that the brothers of Joseph sold him into slavery for 30 shekels. So it tells you how much value they had towards humans for the owning of a human. All right.
New Testament.
And I say that just because he sold according to the story. Anyway, let me fast forward.
I'm sorry. He came to set the captives free. And so that does away with slavery. Jesus tells, and again, this is I talk about this in the chapter, but I mean, like, Jesus tells the parable in Luke 17. Which one of you, having a slave working out in the field all day, when he comes in, would say, "Here, sit down and eat"? No, rather you would say, "Go in and put your apron on and make me dinner, and then come out here and serve me while I eat it." And only after you've done all of those things would you say that he can eat. So, so Jesus came to set the captives free and then told a parable about which one of you. So I don't
Interesting.
know. Anyway.
And definitely a different kind of captive, I would say. But,
Hebrews.
Yes,
think it's somehow covenant.
Obviously, yeah.
Not a slave, but okay.
Oh, I don't think.
Let's see what this kid says.
Issues. Well, just because it says it in the Bible, and it would be I feel like it would be kind of a continual sin, and you're never really going to confess the sin, and because you have that value that's right in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Bible, it says, something different. So does that?
No, yeah, I understand what you're saying. You have to understand the context of the passage before you think the Bible's wrong.
Okay.
And the best book on.
Okay, so all right, enough of Frank.
But the best book, I would bet dollars to pesos now. He said the best book, and I guarantee. Sorry, Paul Copan is the book he's gonna say. Best book to get on that is Paul Copan. It's not a moral monster.
I'm not going back.
It's okay.
Man. I can't do it.
No, I don't blame you. But I'm pretty sure that's who he's gonna say.
Yeah, probably is. All right, we're gonna check out another one here. This was This was a video that was done on Capturing Christianity, and I tried to find one where, it specifically is just done by the host. But no, he's usually like me, interviews scholars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But usually the scholars he gets on are priests who are casting out demons and devils and exorcising people. I'm just teasing. He had a really popular video that was like a priest who was saying exorcisms are legit. And it's like, well, we had simple questions to try and verify that. The same way I interviewed a guy who claims to be Jesus. I had questions for him. I didn't believe him. I even told him that before we started. But anyway, let's see what he has to say here. J. Warner Wallace. I got this at 1.5 speed. So let me know what you guys think here.
These definitions have an impact on how you perceive things. When you use the word slavery, that's a loaded word because most of us think of slavery as
probably too fast
in America, where people are
okay. So most of us think of slavery like what we think of in America. I'm going to go to 1.25. Let's see.
Brought over against their will and treated the way that we were treated in New World slavery. But that word slavery, as you see it in the Old Testament, has a far larger reach, a far bigger net of different situations, different conditions that are roped in. Are there times when it really just means slavery in the way we think of slavery that's involuntary? I think there are times when it is meant that way.
Ooh, good stuff. Okay.
So he's absolutely right about that. There's no question. Mm-hmm. And it's in Semitic, right? It's not just in the Hebrew Bible. So and in Sumerian, right? I mean, in the ancient Near East, the idea of being someone's slave was very broad, right? So you can't just say wherever the word Eved in the Hebrew Bible shows up, or wherever the word Wardum, excuse me, or Arad or whatever shows up, that must be that, this is a debt slave and this is a chattel slave, because this is used, like kings are called Eveds, right? Because they're a vassal of a suzerain. So they write and they say, your slave writes to you saying blah, blah, blah. So the context is what determines what we're talking about. So, I mean, I think that's a great point for him to bring up. I'd be interested to see where he goes with it.
Yeah, let's see what he says. And by the way, I mean, like, I was going through here as quick as I could to see, and he's going to different super chats, bring up different questions. So this specific one by a guy named Jeff, atheists focus a lot on demonizing slavery in the Bible, specifically the allowance of buying and selling of slaves. How do you handle the topic? And yes, if anyone's ever heard of J. Warner Wallace, of course, he is a Christian apologist, but let's see what he says.
Of times in the Old and New Testament, when that word is used, it's really meant for a type of indentured servitude in which there are major differences.
So okay, here, dude, we could have waited 3 more seconds and I would have went, boo, boo. Because here's what he's doing again. They're separating the ancient Near East from the Bible. He went with it in one sentence saying, yep, it's definitely owning people was a real deal. And now, boo. So we got to wrap things up here quick. So
one, in the way that slaves are gathered, whether they're involuntarily gathered, New World slavery, or do they voluntarily enter into servitude because of a debt? Now, keep one thing in mind as you think about the differences between old.
Okay, you get the gist. So look, you got to go soon, and I don't want to jack you up, but I do want to play, if you would allow me, the part earlier that we were talking on the live. I want everyone to see this because this is the powerful part that Jay is a Christian and wonderful guy. Yes. I do want to have him back on. Listen to what he says, guys. This is a Christian, but he's a scholar. He goes to a prestigious, college. He's educating himself on the reality of these things. You want to make a comment?
He is the student, so that it's clear to everybody. I keep saying the name Bruce Wells. Like, he's Bruce Wells' student. Bruce Wells, if you don't know, is an eminent ancient Near Eastern and Hebrew Bible law scholar, legal scholar. So I mean, like, no joke, right? This is he's been trained well. So
real quick, J. Warner Lewis, or whatever the guy's name was on the last video, I was playing Wallace. He's not wrong in saying that indentured servitude and things like that were there, but I suspect it's the same. It's like all apologists go to the same classes to learn how do we deal with this? Everybody, this is what you do. You take them down this path and you let them know that this is all there is and blah, blah, blah. So someone just sent this here. I know you know this, Dr. Josh, but even though it's not your field, you know much more than most, so your opinion is valid. Thank you, Nick
Thank
Ross.
you.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Secretly worship Dr. Josh. I don't really tell anybody that. Oh shit, there's 222 people watching right now.
Wow.
Yeah, I just accidentally leaked my secret. Okay. I want to try and do something here, Jay, that I think would be speed it up. And the first thing I'm going to ask very simple, like bold questions. I'd like both of you guys to comment on, and it'll be interesting to have Jay comment on because he is evangelical. Okay. And what I appreciate about that is like you're trying to honestly assess what the reality was in antiquity. And the sad part, and Josh will tell you this is the sad part that we run into every day. If everyone who was on the evangelical side, and they said, look, we believe in the Bible in many respects. If they accept the realities and didn't try to lie or hide behind, slavery wasn't really slavery, or, sex slaves, undermine. So my question is, leading up.
Wow, that wasn't leading at all.
Oh, yeah, I know, right?
Give the right answer, Jay. Give the right answer.
No pressure. So slavery. Was slavery? Was sex slaves as women a real thing? Did a man who raped a woman actually have the rights to marry this woman? These are bold, immoral things in our current context that we don't even permit. In antiquity, that was well known. It was common. This was something that was probably in the A&E law codes that are everywhere else that we find. Can you answer those things boldly and just let everybody know once and for all?
Where I am on those things?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
So again, I wasn't there. So understand that. I'm taking the documents as I find them and applying whatever methodology I seem to be applying to them. Was slavery real? Yes, absolutely. There are at least two kinds of slavery. There's debt slavery, and then there's the three kinds, debt slavery, what I'll call sex slavery, and then what's called chattel slavery. Okay, so debt slavery is I owe you money, I can't pay it, and so I have to work for you for a certain period of time to pay off my debt. Okay, sex slavery is
pay attention.
For lack of a better term, it's you're buying a woman for her for your sexual pleasure and for her reproductive capacity.
Wow.
So you're basically
Can you
buying a
slow it
slave
down
so you
and
can
just
propagate.
play that section again? I just want everybody to hear.
You felt that. All right, I'm going to slow it down to normal. Here we go.
And what's called chattel slavery. Okay. So debt slavery is I owe you money, I can't pay it, and so I have to work for you for a certain period of time to pay off my debt.
Which is what everybody's talking about. Hold on. That's what all these, just to put it for everybody, that's what the Christians are talking about when they say slavery. They keep bringing up this. That's what they keep doing. Oh, there's a debt slavery. You could make money even. You could owe them, and they still got to make sure you're alive and you eat and all that kind of stuff. And
you still got to make sure that you're alive.
It's sad.
It's so true.
I know.
They have to give you food and a place to live.
That's too
Can
much.
you leave? Well, no, but.
Yeah, that's what they're saying when they say that. So now there's two other versions, and here we go.
Sex slavery is, for lack of a better term, it's you're buying a woman for her, for your sexual pleasure and for her reproductive capacity. So you're basically buying a slave so that you can.
I nodded my head right there, but really what I was saying was, holy shit! I cannot believe he just said that. And dude, Dr. Josh and me were texting each other going, this guy is amazing because, dude, he keeps it real. Like he's not beating around the bush. I don't care what you think about the Old Testament. I was like, in my head, I'm like, yes. Sorry.
Propagate more slaves because the children that she has are going to be slaves. And that's just what it was. Chattel slavery is more akin to what we have or had, in the antebellum South, which is you own somebody for life. And that's just it. And you own their children and their children's children. And that's just the way it is. Their whole life, unless you decide to set them free, is going to be in slavery. Okay.
Damn.
Now, whether or not the chattel slavery was akin to what we had in the antebellum South, I don't think we have enough information to know. It's very possible that it was just as harsh and brutal.
I freaking love this guy. Like, not because what he's saying somehow, like, oh, that's going to add value to a critic or a skeptic. Like, he has a perfect worldview in his own mind, and he's like, look, nah, it's how things were then. Today's different.
Yeah, and I think the thing that, I don't know, it's so refreshing. First of all, it's refreshing to have someone come on who's well trained and is far better trained in the legal sides of the ancient Near East than I am. To have him come on and say, yeah, I mean, you're correct, right? And not that you need that, because I try not to say things that aren't consensus scholarship. I try to, but you know, to have him come on and say that, and then to point out, here's what we can say. It's difficult to know. Probably was like that. It's tough to know because we don't really have that data. I don't know. I really appreciated Jay's honesty in this.
I'm going to stop there because we can always pick this up, and you have to go here soon. And I'm like, oh man, I love you, dude. I seriously do. Ricky Green, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Ricky, dude, always coming through, man.
That's amazing.
His name, at first, when he gave super chats a while ago, I wrote it in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now, I have a customized stamp with gold ink that I actually put. He's at the top of the list. He's not waiting behind anyone at the gates. So, Ricky, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate it. Yeah, you already saw the book I showed you with his name at the top.
Yeah. I'm envious.
Absolutely. Ricky, love you, man. Thanks a lot.
And the fact that I'm envious is why I'm not in that book, right? Because it's not good to
you're
envy.
on the back of the book. When people want to know about the book, they can turn over and get your review. And it wasn't a positive review. Sorry to say. Anyway, no, but seriously, ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor. Go over, and hopefully I can pull it up this time. Let's see. I'm going to do this window. This will make it easier. I want you guys to go check out Digital Hammurabi. His wife and him, or mainly your wife, has been interviewing potential PhD candidates that are actually, looking to go into an expertise in a particular subject in a field. You've been talking about Sumer, I believe. People are studying Sumer. You want to give a little bit of comment on that?
Just very, very quickly. Like, these are all PhD students in ancient Near Eastern studies who are in an accredited institution and are trying to get some funding so that they can continue to live over the summer.
They're not indentured servants, right?
Like, they're not yet, right? So that's what we're trying to keep them, from. But so these are students that are trying to just make ends meet to get through the summer. So that's what the scholarship's for.
Please go subscribe to his channel, help him grow, hit that bell so you're notified every time they drop a video. Look, if you're not doing anything, open the video. If you see they're going live, whatever, open the video, set the phone down, hit the like button, let that algorithm grow the channels, get this information out there, because we want actual scholarship to be brought out to the general public. That's our goal, me and you both. And I have to say, as a plug before you go, I'm coming up to see you in Maryland at the end of May, and we're going to record. I've got my camera gear. I've got new hardware that's got, my little clip in. Let me show this for everybody to see. Got your little transmitters and stuff.
To nice.
Little fuzzies if we want to record outside so the wind doesn't jack us up, but I doubt we're going to do that. Anyway, I got some hardware, guys, and I'm going to be recording a series of videos with Dr. Josh and hopefully his wife as well to put on MythVision, early access to the Patreon members, and to help grow your channel, Dr. Josh, of course, get the books out there and everything. So if you were wondering if slavery was slavery in the Old Testament, do some research and don't just go to your local apologist. You might want to actually ask an expert or somebody who actually studies these things. and not just like a Bible believing Christian on Sunday. Any final words, Dr. Josh?
No, just thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Thank you, brother. And ladies and gentlemen, we are MythVision.